My name is Luna Erickson, and if there's one lesson I've learned after years of working in financial compliance, it's that numbers rarely lie, people do. I'm 35 years old, live in Portland, Oregon, and after my divorce, I built a quiet life that revolves around my career, a small circle of trusted friends, and the belief that peace is something you protect every single day. I don't enjoy family drama, and I certainly don't go looking for it. Unfortunately, trouble has a strange way of finding me anyway. My older sister, Corinne Erickson, has always been the complete opposite of me. She owns a luxury event planning company in Seattle and has spent years building an image of success that everyone seems to admire. Expensive clothes, elegant parties, social media photos from upscale venues. She made it look like everything she touched turned into gold. People admired her confidence. I admired how exhausting it must have been to maintain that image every single day. Growing up, Corinne always wanted to be the center of attention. If I earned an award at school, she'd somehow find a way to make the conversation about herself before dinner was over. As adults, we learned to keep a respectful distance. We still spoke during birthdays, holidays, and major family events, but our relationship had become polite rather than close. It wasn't because we hated each other. We simply lived very different lives and saw the world through completely different lenses. Corinne had one daughter, Brinley, and unlike the complicated relationship I had with my sister, my niece had always been easy to love. She was thoughtful, curious, and surprisingly grounded despite growing up surrounded by expensive parties and constant attention. Whenever we talked, she asked about my work, my travels, or the books I was reading instead of celebrity gossip or designer brands. I secretly hoped she would grow into someone who valued substance over appearances. 3 weeks before Brinley's Sweet 16, I was finishing paperwork in my home office on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. Rain tapped gently against my windows, my coffee had already gone cold, and I was looking forward to ending the day early for once. My phone buzzed across the desk. Corinne. I stared at her name for several seconds. She almost never called without a reason. For a brief moment, I wondered if something had happened to Brinley. That single thought made me answer immediately. Luna. Corinne said without so much as saying hello. I need you to wire me $7,200 today. I blinked. Not can you help me? Not can I borrow some money? Just a demand. I need the transfer today, she repeated. The venue is refusing to hold Brinley's Sweet 16 unless I pay the remaining balance before 5 o'clock. I leaned back in my chair. $7,200? Yes. That's a lot of money. I know, but it's only temporary. My business account is under a banking security review. I can't access it for another couple of days. She sounded rushed, almost rehearsed. I had spent years listening to people explain suspicious financial situations. Something about her voice reminded me of those conversations. The words sounded confident, but the rhythm felt forced. When would you pay me back? I asked. Within 48 hours. And your business can't cover it another way? No. What about one of your credit lines? They're tied up. What about your partners? They're traveling. Each answer arrived a little too quickly, as if she'd anticipated every question before dialing my number. Then came the sentence that made my stomach tighten. If you really care about Brinley, you won't let her birthday be ruined. I closed my eyes for a second. There it was. Not a request. Emotional pressure. Corinne knew exactly which button to push. I never said I wasn't willing to help. I replied carefully. I'm just trying to understand what's happening. There's nothing to understand. I think there is. Silence filled the call for several seconds. When Corinne finally spoke again, her tone had changed. You've become suspicious of everyone. No, I answered quietly. I've become careful. She let out a frustrated sigh. I don't have time for this. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, wondering why a conversation that should have lasted 2 minutes had left me feeling uneasy. 10 minutes later, a text message appeared. It contained the exact amount, the routing number, the account number, and the name of the company receiving the wire. I read it twice. Then a third time. Something immediately stood out. The account wasn't under Corinne's name. It wasn't under her event planning company either. It belonged to a business I'd never heard of before. I whispered to myself, why would the venue want payment through a completely different company? That question refused to leave my mind. By the time the evening sun disappeared behind the clouds outside my window, I still hadn't sent a single dollar. Instead, I kept staring at that unfamiliar company name, unable to shake the feeling that whatever was happening had nothing to do with my niece's birthday at all. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the same questions replayed in my mind. If the money was truly for Brinley's Sweet 16, why wasn't it being sent directly to the hotel? Why was Corinne so defensive whenever I asked ordinary questions? And why did someone who constantly bragged about running a successful business suddenly have no access to a relatively small amount of money? By sunrise, I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to send the wire. Not until I knew exactly where it was going. Instead of driving to my office in downtown Portland, I packed a small overnight bag, grabbed my laptop, and headed north toward Seattle. The drive usually took about 3 hours, giving me more than enough time to replay every conversation I'd had with Corinne over the past year. Looking back, there were little things I had ignored. She had started talking more about expanding her business. She mentioned big opportunities, but never explained what they were. She seemed unusually protective whenever anyone asked about her finances. At the time, I assumed she was simply being private. Now I wasn't so sure. Late that morning, I pulled into the parking lot of the Grand Alder Hotel, the venue where Brinley's Sweet 16 was supposedly being held. The building looked exactly as Corinne had described it online. Large crystal chandeliers visible through the entrance, polished marble floors, and employees moving decorations through the lobby. Everything appeared normal. I walked to the reception desk with my most professional smile. "Good morning," I said. "My name is Luna Erickson. My niece is having her Sweet 16 celebration here in a few weeks. I was hoping to confirm a couple of details because I'm helping with the family arrangements." The receptionist smiled politely. "Of course. One moment." She typed for several seconds before another employee approached. "I'm the banquet manager," he said. "Is there something I can help you with?" I just wanted to make sure everything was on schedule. He nodded and opened another screen. "Everything looks great." I hesitated before asking the question that had brought me there. "I heard there was an issue with the final payment." His expression immediately changed to confusion. "What payment issue?" I forced a small laugh. "My sister mentioned there was an outstanding balance that had to be paid this week." The manager shook his head. "No, ma'am." He clicked through several pages. "The reservation was paid in full nearly 3 weeks ago." For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard him. "I'm sorry, paid in full?" "Yes." "No remaining balance?" "None." "No late payment notice?" "No." He even rotated the monitor slightly, so I could see the status. "Paid in full." My heartbeat became noticeably faster. If the hotel had already received every dollar they were owed, then where exactly was my $7,200 supposed to go? I thanked the manager for his time and walked back outside, but instead of getting into my car immediately, I stood beside it trying to process what I'd just learned. Corinne had lied. Not exaggerated. Not misunderstood. Lied. The birthday party wasn't in danger. The venue wasn't demanding emergency payment. The entire story had been fabricated. I climbed into my car, but didn't start the engine. Instead, I opened the text message with the wire instructions again. The company name still meant nothing to me. I copied it into my notebook, deciding I'd research it later from home. Before I could leave the parking lot, my phone rang. "Corinne." I let it ring twice before answering. "Did you send it?" she asked immediately. There wasn't even a greeting. I looked out the windshield toward the hotel entrance. Employees were unloading flower arrangements while guests walked in and out without a care in the world. I chose my words carefully. The bank is reviewing large transfers. They said it might take another day. The lie came easier than I expected. There was a long pause. Then Corinne spoke again, and something about her voice caught my attention. She sounded nervous. Not frustrated. Not impatient. Afraid. Tomorrow, she asked. Hopefully. You have to make sure it goes through. I'll let you know. She ended the call so quickly that I barely had time to say goodbye. I lowered the phone and stared at the blank screen. If the birthday party wasn't the reason she needed the money, then why was she suddenly so desperate? As I drove back toward Portland that afternoon, another thought slowly settled into my mind. Corinne hadn't asked anyone else in the family. Not our cousins. Not our aunt. Not even our parents. She had come directly to me. Someone who understood financial records. Someone who always asked questions. Which meant she either believed I would never investigate, or she was so desperate that she hadn't considered the possibility. By the time I reached home that evening, my curiosity had turned into determination. I opened my laptop, placed the wire instructions beside the keyboard, and stared at the unfamiliar company name one more time. Whatever that business was, I had a feeling it held the answer to everything. I just didn't realize yet that uncovering that answer would expose a secret far bigger than a fake birthday payment. The next morning, I canceled every non-essential meeting on my calendar. Normally, I hated letting work pile up, but this no longer felt like a simple family misunderstanding. Corinne had invented an emergency that didn't exist, and she wanted me to send thousands of dollars to a company neither of us had ever discussed before. I opened my laptop, typed the company name from the wire instructions into several public business databases, and waited. The first few search results told me almost nothing. The company had been registered only a few months earlier. No website. No social media. No public advertisements. Just a newly formed limited liability company with a mailing address in downtown Seattle. That alone wasn't illegal. Plenty of businesses start quietly. But something else caught my attention. The registered office wasn't located inside an office building. It was inside a commercial real estate law firm. I leaned closer to the screen. Why would an event payment be routed through a company connected to a real estate attorney? Before I could dig any deeper, my phone vibrated. It was Brinley. That surprised me. She rarely called during school hours. I answered immediately. Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay? There was a brief silence before she spoke. Aunt Luna. Can I ask you something? Of course. Mom said you're paying for my birthday. I sat completely still. What did she tell you? She said you wanted to surprise me. I swallowed slowly. I never said that. I figured. Her voice sounded uncertain. Honestly, that's why I called. Something about the way she said it made me nervous. What do you mean? Mom has been acting strange for weeks. I listened without interrupting. She keeps taking phone calls outside. She locks her office whenever she's home. And yesterday I heard her arguing with someone. What were they arguing about? I asked. I couldn't hear everything. She hesitated. But I remember one sentence. What was it? I already found someone to cover the difference. The words echoed inside my head. Cover the difference. Difference for what? I asked another question. Has anything else changed recently? Yeah. She sounded disappointed. She canceled all of my college visits. I frowned. I thought you were touring campuses this summer. So did I. What reason did she give? She said money was tight. That made even less sense. According to Corinne, she was planning one of the most extravagant Sweet 16 celebrations imaginable. Luxury venue. Professional entertainment. Custom decorations. Designer invitations. Yet somehow there wasn't enough money for college visits? Those priorities didn't fit together. Brinley, I said gently, has your mom talked about buying anything new recently? Expanding the business? Making investments? She thought for a moment. Actually, I waited. A man has been coming over a lot. What man? His name's Grant. I recognized the name immediately. Grant Holloway. Corinne had introduced him months earlier as someone she was seeing. At every family dinner, he talked about business opportunities, commercial investments, future developments. I remembered almost nothing else about him except how confidently he spoke. Has he been involved in the birthday planning? Not really. Then what do they talk about? I don't know. She lowered her voice. But every time he leaves, Mom seems stressed. After we ended the call, I wrote Grant's name beside the company name in my notebook. 2 names. No proof they were connected. Just intuition. Still, intuition had kept me out of trouble more than once during my career. That afternoon, I expanded my search. Property filings, corporate registrations, professional licensing records. Then I noticed something unexpected. The mailing address listed for the mysterious company had received legal correspondence from a commercial escrow service less than 2 weeks earlier. Escrow. I stared at that word. Escrow had nothing to do with birthday parties. Nothing. It was commonly used for property transactions, business acquisitions, and large financial purchases. I leaned back in my chair. The pieces weren't fitting together yet, but they were pointing in the same direction. Someone wasn't organizing a celebration. Someone was preparing to buy something. A few minutes later, another notification appeared on my phone. This time it wasn't a call. It was a photograph. Corinne had sent it to the entire family group chat. She stood beside Brinley inside the decorated ballroom, both of them smiling at the camera while workers assembled elegant floral displays behind them. Under the picture, Corinne wrote, "Couldn't have done this without generous family support. Thank you to everyone who's helping make Brinley's dream come true." My eyes narrowed. Everyone in the family would naturally assume I had already sent the money. She wasn't simply asking for financial help anymore. She was creating a story before anyone could question it. For the first time since this began, I stopped wondering whether Corinne had panicked over temporary money problems. This felt planned, deliberate, calculated. I closed my laptop, looked at the 2 names written across my notebook, Grant Holloway and the mysterious company, and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Corinne. Not yet. If she was willing to lie to her own daughter and quietly use my name to support that lie, then I needed facts she couldn't explain away. And I already knew exactly who I was going to call first thing the next morning. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 8 months. Naomi Kessler. We had worked together for years investigating suspicious financial activity before she accepted a position with a corporate due diligence firm in Seattle. If anyone could legally connect pieces that I couldn't access on my own, it was Naomi. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Luna? This is a surprise. I wish I were calling for a better reason." After listening to everything from the fake venue payment to the mysterious company, she remained quiet for several seconds. Finally, she spoke. "You're right not to send that money. I need facts," I said. "Not assumptions. You'll have them." She asked me to text the company name, the routing information, and every detail Corinne had given me. Before ending the call, Naomi added one sentence that stayed with me. "If this is what I think it is, you're about to discover that the money was never meant for your niece." The waiting was unbearable. Every hour felt longer than the last. I tried focusing on work, but every email I answered eventually pulled my thoughts back toward Corinne. Just after lunch the following day, Naomi called. Her voice sounded unusually serious. "Are you sitting down?" "I am now. I found the company." "What is it?" "It isn't an event vendor. I already suspected that. It exists for one purpose." I held my breath. "It's being used as the purchasing entity for a commercial property." For a second, I couldn't speak. "What kind of property?" "A luxury retail showroom in downtown Seattle." The words landed like a weight in my chest. So, the money was never for Brinley's birthday. Naomi continued explaining. The newly formed company had entered escrow only days before Corinne called me. The purchase required additional funds before closing. According to the transaction timeline, one final payment remained outstanding. The exact shortage listed in the escrow notes? $7,200. Exactly the amount Corinne demanded from me. I slowly rubbed my forehead. This can't be a coincidence. It isn't. Naomi paused before delivering the biggest surprise yet. The purchasing company isn't registered under Corinne. It isn't. No. Then whose company is it? She answered without hesitation. Grant Holloway. I stared out my office window in complete silence. Grant. Everything suddenly made sense. The secret phone calls. The fake emergency. The pressure. The emotional manipulation. Corinne wasn't trying to rescue her daughter's birthday. She was trying to quietly rescue her boyfriend's property deal. But why involve me? I finally asked. Naomi had already considered that question. My guess. She continued. If you willingly transferred the money, it would appear as a private family loan instead of outside financing. So no one would question where the missing escrow funds came from. Exactly. That meant I hadn't simply been asked for help. I had been selected. My money would have completed someone else's investment, while I remained completely unaware of what I'd financed. After thanking Naomi, I sat alone for nearly an hour. I kept thinking about Brinley. While Corinne claimed there wasn't enough money for college visits, she had been scrambling to help Grant purchase luxury commercial property. The contrast made me angry in a way I hadn't felt in years. Late that afternoon, another unexpected piece of the puzzle arrived. One of my cousins forwarded me a social media post from Corinne. She had uploaded another smiling family photo along with a caption thanking those who stepped up financially when family mattered most. The comments poured in. Luna is so generous. What an amazing sister. Brinley is lucky to have such supportive relatives. I hadn't paid a single dollar. Yet Corinne was publicly building a false narrative that I had. She wasn't just trying to take my money anymore. She was using my reputation as proof that her story was true. That changed everything. Until then, I had planned to confront her privately. Now I realized she had involved our entire family. Business associates. Friends. Even clients who followed her online. If I stayed silent, the lie would continue growing. That evening, I opened a folder on my laptop. Inside it, I saved every screenshot, every text message, every wire instruction, every public record Naomi had legally shared, every social media post, every timeline, every inconsistency. By the time I finished organizing everything, midnight had come and gone. I looked at the growing collection of evidence and realized one simple truth. Corinne had spent weeks carefully constructing a lie. I only needed one opportunity to let the truth speak for itself. As fate would have it, that opportunity was only a few days away. At Brinley's Sweet 16, in a ballroom filled with relatives, friends, business partners, and the very people Corinne had been trying so hard to impress. The evening of Brinley's Sweet 16 finally arrived. I almost didn't go. For several minutes, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror wondering whether attending would only create more pain for everyone involved. Brinley deserved a happy birthday, not a family confrontation. But then I remembered something. Corinne had already chosen this path. She had lied to our family. She had used my name without permission. She had tried to manipulate me into financing someone else's investment. None of that was Brinley's fault. I picked up my purse, slipped a neatly organized folder of documents inside, and drove to Seattle. The Grand Alder Hotel looked even more extravagant than it had during my earlier visit. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Valets hurried from vehicle to vehicle. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers reflected soft golden light across elegant tables covered with white flowers and sparkling glassware. A live string quartet played near the stage, while photographers moved through the crowd capturing every smile. If someone had walked into that room without knowing my family, They would have believed they were attending the perfect celebration. Brinley greeted me first. She looked beautiful in a deep blue gown, but her smile seemed smaller than usual. She hugged me tightly. "I'm so glad you came. I wouldn't have missed your birthday." She stepped back and lowered her voice. "Mom's been acting weird all day. I noticed. You okay?" I smiled gently. "I will be." She studied my face for a moment, almost as if she sensed I wasn't telling her everything. Before either of us could continue talking, Corinne appeared beside us. "There you are." She kissed Brinley on the cheek before turning toward me. "I'm happy you made it." Her smile looked polished, practiced, but I noticed the brief flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Maybe she was wondering whether I had sent the money after all. Maybe she was wondering if I had discovered anything. Either way, neither of us mentioned the wire transfer. The evening continued peacefully. Guests laughed. Servers carried elegant dinners to every table. Business owners, family members, and close friends filled the ballroom. I recognized several of Corinne's business partners sitting together near the stage. Grant Holloway arrived nearly an hour later. He wore an expensive tailored suit and greeted everyone with effortless confidence. When our eyes met across the room, he smiled politely. I smiled back. He had no idea I already knew about the commercial property. After dinner, the lights dimmed. Corinne walked onto the stage holding a microphone. She thanked the hotel staff. She thanked the entertainers. She thanked her friends. Then she reached the final part of her speech. "And finally," she said warmly, "I'd like to thank my wonderful sister Luna. Without her incredible generosity, tonight simply wouldn't have been possible." The room immediately erupted into applause. Dozens of people turned toward me. Some even raised their glasses. For one long moment, I remained seated. Then I stood. The applause slowly faded. I accepted the microphone from Corinne before she could react. "Thank you," I began calmly. "I appreciate the kind words." Corinne smiled beside me. She thought I was going to play along. Instead, I continued. "There's just one small problem." The ballroom became noticeably quieter. "I never paid for this party." Silence. Complete silence. Corinne's smile disappeared. I looked around the room. "I know many of you believe I wired my sister $7,200 to save tonight's celebration." I paused. "That never happened." Several guests exchanged confused looks. One of Corinne's business partners frowned. Another slowly lowered his wine glass. Corinne stepped closer. "Luna." I gently raised my hand. "I'm not finished." I opened my folder and removed the first document. "A week ago, I visited this hotel because I wanted to confirm the payment situation." I held up the printed confirmation. The banquet manager informed me that this event had already been paid in full nearly 3 weeks before Corinne called asking for money. A ripple of whispers spread across the ballroom. Corinne's face turned pale. "That's not." I removed another document before she could finish. The bank account she instructed me to wire wasn't connected to this hotel. More whispers. It belonged to a newly formed company. I looked directly at Grant. "And that company is currently purchasing a commercial retail property." Grant's confident expression disappeared instantly. One of Corinne's business partners slowly stood from his chair. "What property?" I placed the escrow paperwork on the table nearest the stage. The escrow records show the purchase was short exactly $7,200. Someone gasped. Another guest quietly said, "That's the same amount." I nodded. Exactly. The room had become so quiet that I could hear the photographers lowering their cameras. Then came the final piece. The purchasing company isn't owned by Corinne. I looked at Grant once more. It's owned by Grant Holloway. Every eye in the ballroom shifted toward him. Grant opened his mouth as if searching for an explanation. None came. One of Corinne's business partners walked directly to the documents and began reading them. Another joined him. Within seconds, Both men looked back at Corinne with expressions I had never seen before. Not confusion. Betrayal. Grant quietly stepped backward. Then another step. Without saying a single word, he turned and walked out of the ballroom. Corinne called after him. "Grant." He never looked back. She hurried after him, disappearing through the same doors only moments later. The ballroom remained frozen. No music. No speeches. Just stunned silence. Finally, Brinley walked onto the stage beside me. She looked at the open ballroom doors where her mother had disappeared. Then she looked at me. "You knew." I nodded gently. "I wanted you to hear the truth." She wrapped her arms around me without saying another word. At that moment, I realized something unexpected. The party hadn't been ruined by the truth. It had nearly been ruined by the lie. The ballroom stayed unusually quiet for several minutes after Corinne ran out. No one seemed to know what to do next. The musicians looked toward the hotel coordinator. The photographers lowered their cameras. Guests whispered to one another while trying to understand what they had just witnessed. I looked at Brinley. "This is still your birthday." She nodded, wiping away a few tears before taking a slow breath. Then, to my surprise, she picked up the microphone herself. "I know tonight wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said, her voice trembling at first. "But I don't want everyone to leave because of something I didn't do." She looked around the room. "I've spent weeks thinking this party mattered more than anything else." She smiled sadly. "It doesn't. What matters is that the people who truly care about me are still here." For the first time that evening, the room broke into applause again. Not the polite applause people give during speeches. This one felt genuine. The tension slowly began to disappear. The musicians started playing once more. Dinner continued. Friends gathered around Brinley, offering hugs and words of encouragement instead of awkward questions. The celebration became quieter than originally planned, but somehow it felt more honest. I stayed until the cake had been served. Before leaving, I hugged Brinley one last time. "You deserve better than tonight." She smiled. "I think tonight showed me who actually loves me." 2 days later, the consequences began arriving faster than I expected. One of Corinne's business partners contacted me. He wasn't angry with me. He thanked me. After reviewing the documents from the party, the partners had hired independent accountants to examine the company's recent financial activity. The audit uncovered several unauthorized transfers connected to projects that had nothing to do with the event planning business. None of the missing money had come from client accounts, but company resources had repeatedly been used to support Corinne's personal financial decisions without approval. The partnership dissolved within a month. Corinne lost her ownership position in the company she had spent years building. Grant's situation wasn't much better. Once questions began surrounding the funding behind the commercial property purchase, the seller refused to extend the escrow deadline. Without the missing money and with increased scrutiny from everyone involved, the transaction collapsed. The luxury showroom he had been trying to buy was sold to another investor only weeks later. Ironically, the $7,200 he tried to obtain through deception became the exact amount that prevented the entire deal from closing. As for Corinne, she stopped posting glamorous photographs online. The carefully crafted image she had protected for years disappeared almost overnight. Family members who had once admired her success now understood how much of it had depended on appearances rather than honesty. Several weeks later, she called me. For a long time, I simply watched the phone ring. Eventually, I answered. Her voice sounded nothing like the confident woman who had demanded money only a month earlier. "I'm sorry." I stayed quiet. She continued. "I kept telling myself I was only borrowing the money." Another pause. "But the truth is, I knew exactly what I was doing." Those words mattered more than any excuse could have. For the first time since everything happened, she wasn't blaming stress, bad timing, or someone else. She was accepting responsibility. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said softly. "I know. I just needed you to hear that." After we ended the call, I realized something. An apology doesn't erase betrayal. It simply marks the moment someone finally stops running from the truth. The biggest surprise came from Brinley. One Saturday afternoon, she invited me to lunch. Halfway through our meal, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a brochure from 3 different universities she hoped to visit. "I almost gave up on college," she admitted. "I don't want you to." I reached into my bag and placed another envelope in front of her. She looked confused before opening it. Inside was confirmation that I had established an education savings account in her name using the exact $7,200 I had refused to wire to Corinne. She looked back at me with tears filling her eyes. "You saved it." "I did. I wanted your future to receive that money instead of someone else's real estate investment." She couldn't speak for several seconds. Then she stood up and hugged me across the table. It remains one of the happiest moments of my life. Looking back now, I often think about how easily everything could have ended differently. If I had trusted guilt instead of asking questions. If I had mistaken pressure for love. If I had wired the money without checking the facts. No one would have known the truth until it was far too late. Sometimes people believe supporting family means saying yes no matter what. I don't believe that anymore. Real support isn't protecting someone's lies. It's protecting the people those lies are hurting. In the end, Brinley received something far more valuable than an extravagant birthday party. She received a chance to build her future. Corinne lost the reputation she had spent years trying to manufacture. Grant lost the property deal he believed he could secure through someone else's money. And I gained something I never expected. The certainty that choosing honesty over comfort is almost always the harder path. But it's also the one that lets you sleep peacefully at night. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If this journey reminded you that trust should never replace common sense, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future stories filled with family drama, unexpected twists, and satisfying endings. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and never be afraid to ask one more question before saying yes.